You're listening to the Casting Shadows podcast, an extension of, or sometimes deviation from, material found on the Casting Shadows blog at castingshadowsblog.com. But really is a means of support or a pass behind the curtain or an invitation for conversation stemming from the content on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/RuneSlinger. If you're here by accident and you're not interested in talking about role-playing games, eject now. You'll be happier for it. But if you are interested in role-playing games, then please listen on. It's a long-running joke on my YouTube channel that every time I say something is going to be brief, it takes around an hour for the video to be finished. And it's another long-running joke on the channel that I say it's going to be brief in just about every video. So when I received this call, you'll understand why I laughed and laughed so hard. But despite all the evidence to the contrary that what is being asked of me is impossible, I'm going to give it a shot.
Hey, how's it going, Anthony? This is Karl from the GMologist, and I guess I had a question listening to your Aliens recap. I have the books. I haven't really gone through them, but in a short sentence or two, what is the difference between cinematic and campaign mode? What is the draw from one to the other? Is cinematic actually more horror, more death simply, and campaign, like more, action, survivability? I don't know. So if you could answer that, that'd be great. It sounds really cool. I'm glad your group has enjoyed Alien, the role-playing game, and I really need to pick it up and read through it, especially the Colonial Marines. I feel that appeals to me, or maybe, something.
Thanks for the call, Karl. I appreciate it. And hopefully I can get through this with just a sentence or two as you request. There aren't a lot of differences, actually, between the cinematic mode and the campaign mode, but the small differences make a huge impact on play. So cinematic mode is designed for one-shots or short adventures. So if you look online, you'll see a lot of these adventures run, like 2 to 4 sessions because, of course, playtime is reduced online. We all feel it. We've all commented on it. But you should be able to do one of these cinematic products in one session around the table, or maybe 2. Where things tend to get confusing is that you could, of course, create a campaign out of running a series of cinematic adventures. But cinematic mode and campaign mode in the game work a little differently. So campaign mode removes some mechanics from play introduced by cinematic mode, and I think that's the easiest way to talk about it. For the cinematic mode, each character has an agenda, and the game master, or the game mother in GameSpeak, is invited to set up pre-generated characters for play, more than the number of players that you have, because it is a fairly lethal game, and each of them have intersecting agendas that are designed to clash and come out in play, which guarantees that the play environment for the characters will be more stressful, that the stress mechanic will be invoked more often. This has tempers flaring. This makes everybody, all the characters, be on edge, and that helps bring about the dramatic movie-like or horror movie-like conclusions that we expect from the Alien franchise. There are other smaller mechanisms in play that help mitigate stress, and they can be used from time to time in play to help reduce that rising stress track. Okay, so that's the basis of the difference. We don't have those things necessarily or by rule in the campaign mode. We can focus on the mechanic or the mechanism of rivals and buddies more, but again, this isn't precisely necessary. So we could think of setting up campaign mode as preparing for any type of campaign. You produce your character and you start to play, you discover who they are in play, and relationships form and situations form, and over the arc of the campaign that is created by play, all of these different agendas and relationships and problems and internal struggles are created or defined, rather than introduced at the beginning to have a specific effect on play along a certain track or timeline of expectation. So I hope that answers your question. All the other mechanisms in play, combat, and that sort of thing, are exactly the same. The monsters are the same. How you use the monsters is the same. The alien or other alien species, all of these are exactly the same. Characters are designed the same way. I guess the last thing that we could talk about is that in the campaign mode, there are experience points, and characters are expected to develop, whereas in cinematic mode, the mentality is that it's a one-shot. Okay, so total failure on the 1 or 2 sentence thing, but at least I kept it under 4 minutes. This next call is from Jason of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. He actually called quite a while ago, and I have been waiting to use this until I had an episode where there were more call-ins and shorter segments could fit in. So sorry for the delay, Jason. Also, sorry to hear that you are under the weather. Strep throat is no fun. I hope you get better quickly, and I also hope that you never experience it again.
Hey, Jason here. Just wanted to say I really enjoyed your Troop Play Generational Play episode. Great stuff there. I think the first time I was ever introduced to some of these concepts was actually, aside from maybe board games or computer RPGs, but you're not really role-playing with other people in those, right? Board games you can, but I think the first role-playing game would have been Marvel Superheroes by TSR, which was maybe the first role-playing game I owned, or the second. I think the second role-playing. It was the second role-playing game I ever owned, but the first one I actually GM'd. And I had the Menser basic set that my mom bought me before I had Marvel Superheroes. But anyway, the idea of, especially with the modules that came out for that, where you're bouncing around between different characters. It's not the exact same, but the idea of being fluid and not tied to one character, I think first for me came there.
This is a killer example, Jason, and is one that makes me jealous. I'm always envious of hearing stories of people who got to play TSR's Marvel game when it was new, when they were young, where there was lots of time. I only got to play it once in high school, and I had a blast playing it. I really look forward to playing it again. I moved, and between that brief evening of adventure and my 30s, I never encountered the game again. Of course, I didn't get into my 30s until I was already living over here. And so I still don't own a physical product. I've not found one that was in the right kind of shape for the right kind of money online. It's just this huge hole sitting in my library of games. I have, of course, been able to read it since then, and your example is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It may not be that the players created those characters by switching between, Spider-Man and Iron Man, whoever, but the play experience is the same. You're shifting your perspective from one character to another character, and this is the heart and soul of troop-style play. And if we think about it, this approach to troop-style play is an excellent on-ramp to accepting this as a regular technique for play. That once we understand that, then we could shift between a heroic adventurer and a hireling for a session or part of a session, or we could switch between any one of a number of different combinations that produce different social levels in games, such as, I like to play the Ubiquity-powered game Leagues of Adventure, and there we have different social classes, so you could play the lord of the manor, but you could also play the valet or attaché or butler or whatever, and in different scenes, and have fun throughout. That the getting to experience the perspective of the character is the thrill of it, is the enjoyment of it. Okay, anyway, thanks for the example. That's cool. I have to admit that this next series of call-ins caught me by surprise. A very pleasant surprise and a very welcome one. Thanks very much for everyone who took the time to call in. And rather than talk about it, I'll just share those calls and maybe some commentary in between as we go.
All right, Anthony, just calling in regarding RPGaDay 2022, and I feel your pain, mate. I feel your pain. Yeah, you don't need me to tell you that you're never gonna please all the people all of the time, and I'd like to provide you with a little bit of encouragement, potentially to offset any naysayers and negatives that may come your way. I think the whole thing, whilst it is quite a commitment and an endeavour, I'm sure you fully understand that more than most. It's a great thing and a positive thing to get involved in, taken in the right spirit, and as is most things. I wish you all the best for this year. I hope you don't get too many negatives coming your way. Take care. Catch you later.
Thanks so much for that encouragement. It's amazing to get a call echoing up out of the Spikepit. Very cool, and thanks a lot. Yeah, RPGaDay is definitely a lot of work, and I mean on the individual level, as people start going through the prompts, there are people who send out a tweet, and of course I'm sure they agonize over the correct phrasing with the limited number of characters that they have, and there are people who create visual art, and there are people who do characters a day, and there are people who record their thoughts in multiple languages, and people could turn it into a really big event. And I'm always in awe of the kind of responses that we get from around the world, and seeing it spread and go into translation to so many different countries and so many different ages and generations of gamers. It's really cool. And it's funny how a few negative people can drain that incredible experience of fun year after year. But encouragement like yours goes a long way. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Anthony, it's Joe. Man, really happy to hear you back on the mic. But you just got me so pumped for RPGaDay. I can't wait for it again. Yeah, it's a lot of work, right? Like it takes dedication and it takes work, but it's the work I like doing. I've always had a good time with it for the past couple years when I started doing it, and the work you two put into it, I just really appreciate. And I cannot wait to see what the questions are. I don't care if they're questions or prompts or whatever. I love the idea, man. And I'm super stoked you guys are doing it again. So, yeah, thanks.
Joe, thank you so much for calling in with that encouragement and with that enthusiasm. I'm glad you're looking forward to it again this year. And I'm looking forward to what you do with it this year. And maybe this time when I call in and say, hey, I heard your session on RPGaDay, maybe Anchor will let that recording go through. Either way, thanks a lot. Your enthusiasm means a ton, especially considering all the different things that you're going through right now with your move and everything else. So thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Jason here. Just want to say great episode. Really enjoyed it. And there's a lot of thought-provoking things there. First, I want to mention RPGaDay is a great thing. I really appreciate you guys taking the effort and the time to deal with that and to put it together. And I'm sorry that some people kind of hassle you over it. But you have to do what's going to be best for the community, not for each individual user, as you just described. I am going to participate this year in 2022. I skipped last year. How exactly I'm going to participate, I'm not sure yet. Whether I'll try to do like Jules did and craft a story around it, or if I just do what I did before and record a week's worth of words and publish at the beginning of the week. I don't know, but we will see. Anyhow, I do want to thank you for doing RPGaDay. I think it's an important project, and I'm glad somebody is supporting it.
Thanks for calling, Jason. I really appreciate it. I'm also really stoked to hear that you're going to be coming back to participating again this year, even though you are so busy and you have so many things going on. That's really cool. It's also nice to hear that you are already thinking about how you'll be able to do it to, minimize the impact on time and minimize the effect on the listener. It's a true thing that some listeners out there, people who are not participating in RPGaDay as a creator of posts, they can feel like it's a drain to get a short episode or part of an episode every day. This is a true thing. It's a sad thing, especially considering it's supposed to be positive. But, this is the source of some of the complaints that we hear every year. Regardless, I am really excited to hear that you're going to participate, and maybe my pitch about the format for this year has been accepted, and we're now in the development phase of it, finalizing the different prompts that go along with it. And if all of that makes it all the way through the design process, we may have made it easier for you to do a week's worth of recordings all at once, one way or another. So I'll update you on that when it is time to do so. But anyway, thanks again for calling. Really appreciate it. This next and final segment of this episode will return, or I guess extend, the topic of immersion. This topic saw its genesis this time around in a conversation about the impact of using a familiar or an unfamiliar VTT on how we feel when we play, such as affecting our ability to immerse in one or more aspects of play. And that came out of conversations on the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. So I'm going to start with a series of calls from Jason, but I also got some calls from Joe from Hindsightless on the same topic. So I'll begin with the calls and then finish off with some thoughts of my own.
As far as immersion goes, I will be referencing, of course, you kind of reference this in a call to my show anyway, your show. But I will also be plugging your show. It'll be in the show notes of my show that comes out on June 3rd. And I think you bring up a lot of good points. And, this kind of ties into what you talked about in episode 3.8 of your show, where you talked about the things about the Alien role-playing game that kind of helps with what I would call immersion. The game speak and how the terms flow, the terms for moves in the game flow into normal conversation instead of pulling you out of the conversation by thinking about game mechanics. And I think things like that really help. Even when you do what Colin over at Spikepit calls roll initiative, and now you're in combat mode, if the game speak is more narrative, I think that helps you stay immersed. So we'll see how I'll give my listeners some homework over my show to listen to those episodes 3.8 and this most recent one, and we'll see where that takes the conversation over there. And I look forward to the responses you get over here. I'll have to think about those questions and formulate my own response. Typically, I've always been a social gamer. I would say a beer and pretzels kind of gamer. I know some people don't like that term, but Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'll give you another call, reference that. I had one other comment, though. And that last comment was that a lot of the discussion you're thinking about with immersion is been done in the past, as you mentioned. These arguments are not new. These discussions are not new. I picked up Alarms and Excursions, the old zine by League Old, what's still going from the very beginning of the hobby. I picked up issues 1 through 125. And a lot of the discussions in there are the same ones we're having today. So that's very true. These discussions have been around as long as role-playing games have been around. Che Webster over at Roleplay Rescue has been exploring these questions as well, especially when you hear him talk, like his interviews with Daniel Jones, but like in episode 914 and things like that. But throughout his show, he's been looking at that, are we playing with the gamers that want to play the way we want to play? I definitely think it's okay to play with people who have different play styles, but if you want to get that full experience, then, you may want to cater your group towards that. So there are times you have friends that you want to play with that do like to joke and make the Monty Python references and all that. And it's not that you shouldn't play with those friends, but if you're trying to play Alien and you're doing the cargo crew, the space trucking, and you want to play up the horror thing, you don't want somebody making a Monty Python reference in the middle of that game. So maybe that friend you don't invite to the Alien game, but you play other games with them. So maybe tailor the group towards the experience you're looking for. That's always an option too. So, yeah, great show. Very thought-provoking. I appreciate everything that you do, Anthony. Thank you very much. And I look forward to your next one.
Thanks for the series of calls, Jason. Lots of good stuff in there. I think I'm going to respond to them in a sort of scattershot method, as lots of things are going around right now, most of them on 4 legs and expecting me to feed them. But one of the through lines I see in the points that you raise is one that I'm going to talk about when I answer Joe Richter's calls from Hindsightless after this. There is this sense that immersion, I feel, becomes harder and harder the more social friction that we experience. And by social friction, I just mean interaction with the rules, or interactions between people, or interactions between the method of play like Zoom. These things matter, and they affect whatever it is that we consider immersion to be. So the point that you are raising, the point that, you're right, Che Webster talks about in Roleplay Rescue, is this notion of playing with the right people. In my circles, we talk about the holy trinity of role-playing games. And that's talk with the players, play the right game, and don't be a problem. Of course, most people say that last one is don't be a dick. But you can see how this can work on the social level of play to help you get to the experience that everybody that you're playing with wants, right? Is there a problem? Talk with the players. Do you want to play a game? Talk with the players. Is the game going well? Talk with the players. Is the game going poorly? Talk with the players, right? Be honest. Actually report your feelings to each other about play. Like, I love these characters. I love this setting, but I'm having this small problem with the system, or with the schedule, or with the length of play, or with the VTT we're using, or whatever, right? Whether it's going well or going poorly, whether it's meeting expectations or somehow failing to meet expectations, talk with the players. After you have worked out what it is that you want to do by talking with each other, and how you want to do it by talking with each other, then it gets easier to play the right game. And playing the right game doesn't mean that this game is better than that game. Objectively, you know this. I can hear you talk about it in exactly the same way on your show, right? It's that right now, with this group of people, this particular moment, with these particular drives, there's a great game out there for you. The right game for that feeling, for that group. right now. Play the right game. And when it starts to go astray, go back to rule number 1. Talk with the players. If it's turning out to actually be awesome, talk with the players. Reinforce that positivity. Which leads us into the third part of the Holy Trinity, which is don't be a dick. Right? Don't be a part of the problem. Don't refuse to participate in talking with each other. Don't keep your feelings a secret. Don't broadcast feelings to try and manipulate to get what you want, right? Be a part of the solution. So these 3 rules, this Holy Trinity, help to reduce the social friction that we're talking about. And if we can make it a comfortable and a regular or expected part of what play is, then it gets easier to do that very difficult thing that we just talked about. Sometimes, for some games, we can't play with some people. Or, the other way around, if we're going to play with the same group of people all the time, there are some games that we are never going to be able to play. These are tough decisions to make alone, like to think to yourself as the game master, well, I'd really like to play Alien, but these 2 guys hate horror games, so I guess I'll never get to play it. That kind of sucks. At the same time, saying, hey, you 2 guys, you're not invited to Wednesday's game because we're playing Alien, coming out of the blue like that, also sucks. And so I find that Holy Trinity helps to ease that social friction to make it possible to say, look, we want to play Alien. Let's find a night where we can do that with the people who want to do that. And on Friday, let's do something together, right? And now you're playing 2 games, and that's even better. Anyway, thanks again for this call and for the kind words of encouragement and support. Really appreciate it. And also, thanks for giving homework to your listeners. I don't know how thrilled they'll be about it, but I was thrilled to hear it when you shared everything that you said on your podcast, which was awesome and slightly embarrassing to hear. So thanks again, and I hope you feel better soon, and I will talk to you soon.
Immersion. All right. Well, let's talk a bit about what immersion is to me. For me, it's when I'm playing and either running or playing, and everything has just kind of come together. The rules have come together with the story, have come together with the other people at the table being invested and engaged, and everything just seems to be going. Now, I don't forget about the rules. Like, that's part of it, right? Like, I'm excited about the dice roll that's coming up. I'm excited to see if this character is going to make a saving throw or not. But also just like, we're excited to see if they make the saving throw, because the moment that's going on in the story right now is just so crazy and awesome. Part 2 coming up. And it's just so awesome because we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know which way the dice is going to go. And then the story just unfurls from there. And everyone's just like, ah! And they're present, and they're in it, and they care about what's going on. Even though we all know we're playing a game, we care about what's going on, and everybody's actively engaged. And that's what immersion means to me. And so the quickest trigger for me to get immersed is when the other people at the table are also immersed. When the folks at the table are actively engaged in the game, immersion is easy. It's when other people aren't that it makes it tougher. So, yeah, man. Those are my thoughts on immersion. Awesome question. Thanks for posing that. Have a good night. Peace out.
Thanks for those observations, Joe. I think it's really helpful, and I think there are a lot of people out there who have experienced what you're talking about, even if they haven't thought about it in terms of giving that experience a label. It may just be a part of play that they really like, when everything is working smoothly or flowing smoothly, when people might say that they're in the zone, or that the system got out of the way, or there's all these different catchphrases that come up that talk about the smoothness of play. And I find those experiences relate to the reduction of barriers, right? We don't know the system very well. That's a barrier. But when we all know the system quite well, or at least know the parts of it that we're using, then the game seems faster. And then after some time of that, the game seems easier. And then after a longer time of that, we start finding it harder to understand why someone else might be having trouble with it. The curse of knowledge, in other words. And I think this progression is really interesting, and I think it has an influence on how we talk about play with each other, because we're all at different levels of experience, so to speak, with the games that we play and how we choose to play them. I've played with groups that were completely disinterested in anything that we might want to label as system mastery. They play with the books open, they look the rules up all the time, they rarely talk in character, they talk about character. Everything is happening on what I describe as the player layer of play. All interaction, all conversation is passing from player to player. And there are observers who would look at that and say, those people are never immersed. And I would find that would be an error, because it's entirely possible that they are completely immersed in their play. They're just not immersed, maybe, in aspects of it that the observer has come to regard as an immersive or engaging experience, right? And typically that tends to be about character, right? There seems to be this holy grail idea of being able to imagine very vividly in your mind's eye from your character's perspective and calling that immersion. But some people don't imagine vividly or visually. Some people imagine completely different things. Some people focus on different aspects of play, such as the idea of an unfolding story, or the idea of collaborating on creating a story, or the idea of experiencing a character, or the idea of seeing what the results from the dice rolls are, or some combination of these things. It's a nuanced topic, and our experience of it changes with each group that we play with. Sometimes by a lot, sometimes by a little. This makes it really slippery to talk about. So I really appreciate you reporting your experiences and bringing up this really stellar and important point that barriers to play form a kind of friction or resistance to the experience of whatever immersion might be for that particular mix of players with that particular game at that particular time. The more friction that there is, such as when Jason was talking about using the VTT with some groups and not with others, that sense of friction can really have an impact on immersion. Anyway, thanks for the call. So I'd like to end this episode with some of my thoughts and my observations on my own experience of immersion or immersive play, and at least in an effort to try and connect with what Joe and Jason have shared calling in. So for me, play, as you can probably tell listening to any other episode, play revolves very strongly around the idea of the perspective of the character, right? What if this character were real, this setting was real, and we as players can try to experience in some way that character's life through the power of getting to make decisions for them, to act upon, to interact with, and react to the things that play produces, considering the perspective and the abilities and the interests and agendas and goals and personality of the character or characters in a troop style environment that we are playing. For me, it's never really been about story. But that doesn't matter. Whatever the thing is that you are going for in play, this might be, but it doesn't seem to be guaranteed to be, this might be a helpful trigger for immersive play. If we can get the things that produce friction or resistance out of the way. Right? So it seems far more likely that we will have an opportunity for an immersive experience if the game has a good flow to it, has the right pace. Not necessarily a fast pace, but the right pace for you and your group to all be able to feel comfortable and grounded in doing the thing that you're playing that game to do on whatever layer of play, a player level, a system level, a character level, a story level, right? Whatever you're there to do, the right pace, because you have reduced some of the barriers or reduced some of the friction to getting that pace. That's conducive. That can be a good trigger for play. It's also a reason to just play, to get there and actually do it. You're certainly not going to immerse in anything game-related if you can never get yourself motivated to go play. But what can be meant by immersion or by engagement? Are they the same? Are they different? Well, I think it's easier to talk about engagement because then we don't have to talk about immersion. The two might be used by some people talking about this phenomenon. They might be used interchangeably, but they might be used, as I mentioned in the previous episode, as stage 1 and stage 2 of an experience. But engagement, or the sense that, we are really enjoying what we're doing, we want to continue doing what we're doing, we're very focused on it, we're willing to ignore what's going on around us in favor of that activity. I think this is a very important aspect of this topic of immersion. What makes immersion seem like a good word choice for me, and what makes it suit the experience that we're talking about, is that in hindsight, after play, I can recognize that I lost some time. Like, wow, I can't believe that it's been 4 hours already. It just felt like an hour, right? That kind of thing. It was very, I fumble for any other word, but immersion, right? The movie was 3 hours long, but it just felt like 30 minutes. I was immersed. The book, 800 pages. But I've been reading all day, and I haven't noticed, right, that I haven't gotten up out of the chair, I haven't moved, I haven't eaten, I haven't done those things, right? I ignored all other things in favor of this thing. It was immersive, right? Not so much that I was transported to the fantasy realm that I could see everything that my character, if they were real, would see. But it certainly is easy in hindsight to remember the events of play in a more imaginative fashion, connected more to my ability to visualize in my memories. It's easier to do that when there was this immersive experience where all other things, all other concerns were pushed into the background to some degree. And, oh wow, we've been playing for 2 hours and look at all that we've done. And that was really immersive. Sometimes, but not always, this can include the concept of emotional states from the situation, from the film, from the book, from the game, finding resonance in ourselves, where the characters have suffered a great loss. All we know is that a fictional character has died, or a fictional town has fallen on hard times. If the characters are real, they would feel these negative emotions. We are real, and these worlds are fictional, and yet we also feel these emotions from time to time. Sometimes we simply have sympathy for, or sometimes we have empathy for, but sometimes we actually manifest these emotions too. We are connected through our emotions to what we have imagined. The imagined situation of play, the imagined characters and personalities of play have affected us in a very real way outside the game. We carry that sense of loss or excitement or fear out of the room with us when we go. And I find that this is another sign that play has been, to one extent or another, immersive. I don't think that we can just easily dismiss this phenomenon of play. I think we can find moments where focus on whatever it is that we're playing for, whether it's using the system or talking as characters or exploring or, learning a new game, which is something that I do a lot. I find I can immerse myself in learning a new system. And I look up and say, wow, we've been playing for this long? So, in a nutshell, a very long, I guess, almost 8-minute nutshell, that's the foundational report I can make about what immersion means to me, how engagement leads to immersion, and how we can recognize that immersion has taken place without having to pigeonhole it into immersion in character, immersion in the scene, immersion in play, immersion in the camaraderie. I find it's very important to remember that we immerse in something. And it's helpful to be clear what we think we are immersing in, rightly or wrongly. And I think this leads to the conversation moving on from what we have collectively, but also very, very separately and sadly, repetitively talked about in isolation, right? As Jason pointed out in his calls, looking back to Alarms and Excursions, which is a phenomenal resource, right? To show us what we have always talked about, what we first noticed. We can actually see the first footsteps in gaming are mirroring the first footsteps in gaming of newcomers to the hobby now in 2022, right? What those people experienced back then as the first people to do it is being re-experienced almost perfectly now. We have an opportunity to move the conversation forward. We have the tools to move the conversation forward. But this seems to be the pattern to discovery of the role-playing game hobby from the perspective of the player. These are the things that we will end up experiencing and we will end up talking about, we will end up caring about as new players. People who, when they start play, know nothing. And then as they play, learn some things. They observe some things. They're exposed to some things. They enjoy some things and don't enjoy some other things. And we all have our interesting mixes and matches of those things. But then, do we talk with the players? Do we find our way to play the right games? And are we ultimately part of the problem or part of the solution? All right, that brings us to the end of another episode. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. And I hope you'll consider calling in and adding your thoughts to the conversation if they interest you, or suggesting another line of conversation. For those people who did call in, thank you one more time for your messages. They were right on time, and they carried the right kind of encouragement to help us get through that difficult time of will we or won't we, and the difficult time of dealing with all the other stuff that goes on in the background in real life. So thanks for calling in. Until the next time, as usual, take care.